So Fran Fennell was young when he kind of became a high-end boss of a drugs mob with a very interesting um, business model. But when you see the photograph that we have of him with Eamon Dunne, with his arms just around him, it's just like it's like one of those photographs that just it's grooming, isn't it?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, those photos were taken probably at the height of Eamon The Don Dunne's sort of power.
And he was killed in 2012.
Killed in 2012.
At which point then Fran Fennell was only 23. So those photographs that we're talking about, which were taken on a night out,
yeah, I think
Fran Fennell could be 20, 21, 19.
Exactly. And if you look at who's in the photographs, they're in the broader set. There's a couple of guys, Eamon Dunne's vintage. Brian O'Reilly is in one of them, who subsequently survived two assassination attempts, very close associate of Eamon Dunne. And then there's a group of young lads with them as well, all around Fran Fennell's age, all from Ballymun. One of them, a guy called Daniel Doyle, subsequently died tragically, but he had also spent time in prison. So these guys were, I suppose, the younger generation who were associating with them, and they had them doing what needed to be done from their perspective.
You see, not everyone becomes the boss, you know, but Fran Fennell did, and he is obviously, you know, they have him in their sights. They obviously see him as being profitable to them, and clearly he makes his own way and becomes in his own right, a boss. Now, every party must end, and his did.
Yeah.
Because he is, well, his days of mixing, as you say, with models and socialites, because he was the cocaine dealer to the stars, really. And it's wound up getting him a nice lengthy sentence.
Yeah, so I mean, I think what happened then is after the Eamon Dunne passed away, Fran Fennell probably, you didn't hear a lot about him for a while, but he then re-emerged mixing in the world of socialites, influencers in the best clubs in Dublin, hanging around with models. And you could see it in his social media accounts, where once he'd been hanging around Ballymun, I think that picture taken with Eamon Dunne was in a pub in Ballymun. Then all of a sudden he's in the complete opposite world. And you could just see in the social media accounts, jetting here, I think it was Dubai, Australia, Cuba, all these places. And, you know, just living an absolutely incredible lifestyle. He, a couple of times, was being mentioned on kind of entertainment websites for being linked to this model or that model. And, you know, it had been an incredible transformation. But it was being funded, of course.
Body and soul, of course, because he had all the looks to go with it, that, you know, he fitted into that crowd.
Yeah.
He had the tan, he had the muscles, and he had all the designer clothes.
Yeah. But now, of course, he's this last week he got a 10-year prison sentence, 2 years suspended. So again, he's mixing back in with very different company than what he was.
That was for drug trafficking.
And that was for conspiracy drug trafficking offences. So really what happened to him was that, you know, we started hearing about him, I think, as being supplying cocaine to people, I think it was said, around the Grafton Street area, which was kind of a broad...
I might have said that.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, so he was providing...
These things come back to bite you.
They do, but it was basically supplying people who were selling cocaine.
Recreational cocaine users,
yes,
middle class.
Very middle class. But also he was running the second business, his main business, which was organising drug mules to fly to Australia and New Zealand.
That was his entrepreneurial side that obviously Eamon Dunne and others saw in him when he was young, because he had actually travelled to Australia on a holiday and realised that, you know, it's the most expensive place in the world to buy cocaine. It said it's 4 times as expensive to buy coke there than here. Maybe that figure has changed, as they all do. But Australia has a curious relationship with drugs. It uses, as a country, an enormous amount of them. But is prepared to pay a huge amount of money for them. And a lot of the drugs are controlled by these biker gangs, and they're kind of Asian gangs in Australia and New Zealand in particular. They have a sort of a different kind of a crime scene than we have here. But there's also always been value in people literally swallowing drugs, taking that massive flight across the world, and then, you know, whatever way you get them back up, and selling them. Because if you can ingest you know, what, 100 grand's worth of cocaine. And maybe that's too much, but you're multiplying your profits if you get to the other side alive by 4. So it's been a huge incentive always, but he actually ran a business model on it, and he sort of hired a lot of his friends from that social world we talked about, models and influencers and all this sort of stuff, to literally take a flight to Australia. It's preferable, I believe, for women to be mules.
Yeah.
Because they don't actually have to swallow the drugs. They can carry them internally.
Body packet, as they call it.
Yeah.
So they.
And do you know why that is, particularly going to Australia? Because if you are a female and you carry the drugs internally, you can take them out if you wish on the flight, because it's 24 hours, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, most people stop off. But you can do that, which lowers the risk of whatever containers they're in disintegrating within the body. And obviously people can die if...
Yeah, so I mean, I think there was 2 advantages. Like, there's a huge amount of young Irish people over in Australia as well. So it was that and there's a regular stream of people. It's not gonna ring any alarm bells to have people flying back and forth to Australia, young people from Ireland. And once they got over there and you know, got the drugs through customs, there was a network of people to sell it to supply it to, and to, you know, to deal the cocaine. So it wasn't as if you had to, once you got over there, you had to forge ties with these biker gangs or whatever. You had a whole stream of people, and there's so many Irish and English people over there. You know, they're living a party lifestyle and looking for recreational cocaine. So models were being hired. I think they were not just models, but young women mostly.
Executives and students, I think, from memory as well. He was kind of signing them up. There was such a lure. They were getting a free holiday the other side of the world, plus money.
Yeah.
And the risk seemed low to them.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it was suggested people could carry up to 300 grams of coke during a flight. So it was a business that really, really boomed. Obviously, when it came to court this week, it was, as these trials do, they focus on a section of time, a bit where they can join all the dots if you want. But he ultimately came to the attention of, look, they probably had some intelligence or going on or whatever, but he was stopped at Darwin Airport in April 2015. He was questioned. While they were questioning him, the Australian police seemed to have downloaded information from his phone. He was released without charge and went on his business. Then when he came back to Ireland in January 2016, police carried out a raid that was unconnected with what had happened before, is how it was described in court. And they recovered that handset along with, you know, a certain amount of money and stuff. And then the Australian police forces had shared what information they downloaded that could be connected to a handset in Ireland. There was further raids, and eventually this case was able to be put together about him basically directing this organisation, which is what he was when he was convicted this last week. That's what was said, that he was directing this whole operation from start to finish. See, even though you know what we do know about him was that he's from the Ballymun area, but he had kept extremely close ties with a drug dealer that was very close to Ross Browning. Ross Browning, of course, you know, was described recently as the Kinahan cartel's #1 man in Ireland, but Browning had a particular oversight role over the drugs trade in Finglas, you know, supplying gangs like the Flashy Gang, various others. But Fran Fennell, it is believed, was one of those people that he supplied through an associate. And, you know,
Kinahan's had a finger in every pot in those years anyway, didn't they? I should just make a correction. I said that Eamon Dunne was murdered in 2012. It was 2010.
Was it 20?
Which actually makes Fennell even younger than we're talking about there. He really is only a teenager when he's sitting in a pub with Eamon The Don Dunne's arms draped around his neck, you know,
and other senior members of that gang. So, look, it really, it brings it home.
Now, in 2018, the New Zealand authorities took €50,000 off him that they had discovered in they discovered, they found another amount of money in bank accounts that had been transferring between Australia and New Zealand, something around €150,000 that he'd obviously just been putting into accounts to have out there for his spending money, working out how to wash it and get it back to Ireland. But they actually seized that and it went into the Exchequer. They have a similar kind of a proceeds of crime legislation that we have. So he's been kind of like on the radar of police and been sort of, been relieved, shall we say, of both drugs and his proceeds of crime over the past, 8 years?
8 years. And I mean, it's interesting again that you have, and it as it was said in court, that what the Australian police downloaded from his phone in Darwin Airport is introduced into a court in Ireland. I know he pled guilty, so you didn't hear a trial, but that's the sort of level of cooperation that was going on. Like, obviously a lot of this money was being transferred back in sort of mule transfers again, backwards through the normal banking system as well, because it's one thing to
He's using that Western Union system of transfer.
Exactly. And I mean, what happens there is that people, if you send up a massive amount of money backed by Western Union, you're gonna set off alarm bells. So it has to be sent back in bits through different accounts.
I'm going to ask you this now, Nicola.
Yeah, go on.
But was Revolut there then?
I don't think, no, Revolut wouldn't have been there at all. So
Revolut has kind of changed things again, hasn't it?
It has. I mean, if you think about the other side of it all, like, it's one thing to smuggle drugs internally, but you're not going to be able to smuggle back 50 grand in cash.
No.
So, like, that is another huge problem for him. Like, there really isn't any other way other than certainly then, except for through the banking system, one way or another.
He's obviously, he's doing 8 years now behind bars and probably knows quite a number of people, given the kind of the circles he was mixing in back when he was a teenager and, the circles he's mixed in since. But he's obviously quite a clever business mind for a young guy who probably, hasn't a college degree.
No. I mean, look, you have to look at it this way, that he has a clever business mind. He was able to adapt to very different circumstances than most of the drug dealers that we write about, who very much say embedded in a certain mindset. He was able to mix with all these other people. He was able to concoct an elaborate scheme to move money, to move drugs, to keep people involved, to operate this whole gang. I think even in court he was described by his own
counsel.
defense. He said it was an extraordinary achievement. Of course, it was wrong, but it was a significant achievement. And you can't say that's not true. You do. I always say this, and you sometimes agree with me or don't. But if he had committed himself to a regular business, God only knows what that would be. Selling something to Australia.
Yeah, something successful.
Something like, I don't know, like some sort of health food or something like that. You'd have to think that he could have made a really good go at that, and it could have been living a new life for himself. But he's not, and the lure of, I suppose, that lifestyle, and to be able to travel, live without any restrictions in your mid-20s. I mean, he was living in a very nice penthouse apartment, I think, back here.
Yeah.
There was other properties that he was associated with, moving around various properties.
I believe there was a proceeds of crime case possibly still underway here in relation to him, as in a proceeds of crime investigation rather than anything.
Yeah.
Judge Pauline Codd said that Fennell had been the main beneficiary and played a central role in all the activities, right?
Yeah.
So she also said he saw it as a get-rich-quick scheme, and you can see that sort of the age, the lifestyle. Yeah. Absolutely, that's what he wanted. He wanted a lavish lifestyle. But she was also told, and she took into account, that he had a former drug addiction himself and difficult family background.
Yeah.
Before he came to this, and he was, she said, the top rung of the ladder and a mastermind of the extensive and serious criminality. So he has 44 previous convictions.
Yeah,
and she headlined that sentence of 14 years before the mitigating circumstances, which included his guilty plea, his age at the time, and evidence of steps towards rehabilitation. So he is making efforts to try and maybe come out of jail on a different path of entrepreneurship. Was there information about the other associates who were sentenced with him? One of them was a guy called Christopher Mellon.
Yeah, there was a number of there was 4 other people who had various roles in the operation.
Mellon was pleaded guilty to 2 counts of money laundering.
Yeah, so he probably he ultimately got a fully suspended sentence.
No previous convictions whatsoever.
No, so I mean, this is his role was to move that money, to get that money back.
He transferred, I think, money on just 2 occasions that they were able to identify in Perth.
Yeah, so I mean,
so you can see somebody like him is probably somebody drawn into that world, and I have no doubt that given what he was doing and the circles he was mixing in, there was probably people drawn into criminality that would never have been otherwise.
And I mean, of course, this conviction focuses on a relatively small time period, which is the way cases come. You know, you can't introduce all this other stuff. You can introduce what you have. Basically, I presume, since the evidence wasn't fully heard, it'll be what there was text messages for. They were downloaded from his phone. It'll be him directing this person to put that money in that bank account and collect this and that. So
she noted that this chap Mellon had completely rehabilitation, was now running a number of successful businesses. So he has obviously turned his back on any of that offending. And he was 23 at the time, had a party lifestyle. Exactly what I mean. Like Fennell would have been who's coming from a background where he is ingrained in very high-end serious, or certainly mixing with very high-end serious criminals at a young age. A lot of people he came into contact with were people who were probably out having a good time. You know, and young, and all of a sudden they find themselves caught up in something that they maybe otherwise wouldn't have.
Yeah, so I mean that was Christopher Mellon. There was probably other people that were more deeply involved in the drug operation. There was 2 guys, Alan Fagan and Paul Fagan. Alan Fagan,
they brothers.
I'm not exactly sure, to be honest. But Alan Fagan's described as a leading lieutenant on the ground, and he was instrumental, I think, in sourcing the cocaine, meeting the drugs couriers, mixing the drugs, preparing them for transportation. And he was also moving the money as well. He got a 6-year sentence with 4.5 years suspended. Paul Fagan was also involved. He was pled guilty to conspiracy to bring the proceeds of criminal conduct into the state on dates 2014. So that's basically, he was over an extended period of time. He was involved in the receipt of drugs couriers and drugs into Australia and helping the mules, basically. So he also got a 3.5 years suspended out of a 6-year sentence. And then we had another guy, Aaron King, who was much younger. Aaron King would have...
At the time. He's only 30 now.
He's only 30 now, so he was a very young man. He would have featured in the Sunday World in various forms as well. Even in advance of this court case, he had 22 previous convictions. His role included wrapping the drugs for drugs mules, finding mixing agents, and money laundering. He was described in court by the judge as having a chaotic and unstable childhood, and became swept up into the lifestyle. So he ultimately got a 4.5 year sentence with 18 months suspended. And she also...
The judge sort of noted that they were all young. They had somewhat different backgrounds, but they were all young. But at the same time, they weren't kind of too young, that the other people their age at the time in their early 20s would have had more of a moral compass than to get involved in this sort of thing.
Yeah, I think the sentence is sort of as well, like it's you know, it can't be compared to guys going around shooting people and breaking legs for drug dealing, can it? Like, you know, it's not on a moral level. I'm not saying it's okay or anything of the sort, but it was very much a non-violent operation. They made a lot of money. They took a lot of chances. They knew exactly what they were doing.
I wonder if any of it left. Or is it all a distant memory?
Well, I'd say...
Is it all sort of something that they look back on photographs and go, oh my God, remember when I could afford those runners?
Well, look, it's all there on social media. He's actually, he was Fran Fennell. Like, the reason I actually remember him is because it was one of the first pictures we had of Eamon Dunne.
He was in it.
Well, he was in it, Fran Fennell.
Yeah.
And not only was he in it, but it was on, now I'm not 100% sure if it was Facebook or Bebo.
Yeah.
But it was back in those days, and one of the first pictures ever found of Eamon Dunne, because he's posing in one of them and sort of flexing his biceps.
Do you mean it was on Fran Fennell's social media?
Somebody had sent it to us saying, there's a picture of Eamon Dunne here on a guy called Fran Fennell's.
So Fennell had put it up proud of his association.
Yeah, he had put it up on his thing, I think. There was another guy, a guy called Dan O'Doyle who passed away. Both of them were really, really one of the first guys who were social mediaing all the time, putting everything up.
It was very hard, though, if you get all of that, they've got it from illegal means, from using human beings to traffic large amounts of cocaine in their stomachs or elsewhere across the continent, which is hugely dangerous because it has happened that these things have exploded inside people and they're lucky if they do survive it. But they've all that money from all that at such a young age. Like, where do you go from there?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think that the issue is, of course, that it's like, where do they go when they come out now?
How do you go? Like, I'm talking lifestyle even alone. Forget about that they're going to jail. Some of them aren't. Some of them are. Some of them will feel disgraced by us talking about them, by being outed in this way. Some of them will do jail easy, some won't, whatever. But lifestyle-wise, how do you go from having all that to, having to count your pennies at the supermarket checkout?
Yeah,
I mean, it's really hard to go the other way around, isn't it? It must be very difficult.
Yeah, and that's the temptation. I mean, that is the difficulty, and it's not just that's the temptation to start it again. Look, I remember, and obviously this isn't comparing Fran Fennell with Johnny Adair and the like, right? Who are the UDA guys who are really, really wealthy and dangerous people, and people were living in terror of them and all of that in their community. But I know that those guys got expelled ultimately from the north by their former associates, and they were living over in Scotland.
Yeah.
And they were on the dole.
Yeah.
And they were getting the odd gig in as bouncers or something like that. They never managed to reignite their criminal career. And I think that's why that was really, really difficult for those guys.
Yeah, but those guys, I suppose, they could always lean back and claim it was for political reasons that they were doing it in the first place. So that allows them to hold their chin up a little bit, or maybe even inside do that. But to have had enough money to be able to go out and to buy, a Louis Vuitton handbag twice a month.
Yeah.
And to go then to get your...
the best
if
clubs.
you get a job, you're lucky then when you come out of prison and you have a conviction.
Yeah.
To all that, the best clubs, champagne, you don't have... In actual fact, you only look at the menu to see what the most expensive thing is on it, to buy it. And hotels and people, the service industry is such that the more money you have, the more respect you're given within it. And to go from that to, hoping to get a job somewhere maybe, and if not, living off the dole.
Yeah, it's difficult. But can I say this? If people have a real
if they
change,
have love.
Well, if they have... I was going to say that. I wasn't going to say...
You were, actually.
No, I was going to say, if people can have a sort of a psychic change, a real change of perspective, which some people can in terms of addiction, where they can change their ways and become of help to other people that are going through things. And you do see that as well.
You do, of course. It's not all about material goods. But,
no, but you do see people coming from that lifestyle and then they make this change and they start becoming of use to their community and all that. And they get something, they get some sort of...
Well, young guys like that, I mean, in an ideal world, hitting their 30s, they'd just get a bit of sense.
Yeah.
And they'd settle down a bit, get a job, a car, maybe a lady, whatever, start having families. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And your whole reason to be changes anyway, naturally.
It does.
Naturally, as you kind of mature like that through life. But yeah, anyway, just musing about that.
Yeah. Well,
wondering how you could...
Yeah, well, it's not easy, of course, because you get used to people get used to a certain level of risk and danger and excitement in their life. And like, without that, where are you, That's why people get sucked back in.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Niall, thank you very much.
Thanks, Nicola.
I'm Nicola Tallant and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.